Um, so first question that we can ask and that we can check on the data is, first of all, are transnational companies big or small? Well, the answer is probably very easy because probably most of you would guess that they are large. But the question is how large? And to do this, we and in particular, is the difference in size the same across all countries? Here to answer this question, we can have a look at the data. As I was saying, this graph shows you across different countries the share of transnational company for different classes of firm size. So the light blue bar is the share of transnational company that have less than 50 employees. Medium, the red or pink bar, is transnational company with employees between 50 and 249, and the green, or I don't know how to define this color bar, are large transnational company, meaning that they have more than 249 employees. As we will see across countries, the pattern is very stable. Transnational companies belongs for large majority to the large class, so they have more than 250 employees. However, it is interesting to see that there are also small transnational companies, and they're not few. Okay, if you look, for instance, at the UK, you can see that there are, let's say, something like 4% of. So the way in which you read this vertical bar is that you should multiply it for 100 in order to identify the percentage. Okay, so if you look at the UK, for instance, this suggests that firms that are multinational, transnational companies that are large are the 25%, medium are something like the 15%, and the small are something like the 4%. So it means that transnational companies that are small in the UK are 5% of the companies, which is not, is of course less than 250. So as a share is less than the transnational companies that are large, but it's not zero. It's not zero. Okay, so there are also transnational companies that are relatively small in size. There are in Italy as well, and in fact, in Italy, if you read journals and some kind of standard press, you will also see the definition that is sometimes used in newspaper article for Italian transnational companies, which is multinazionali tascabili. Okay, why? Well, because Italy is well known for having a population of firms that is characterized by a small size. And it is also characterized by the fact that there are some of these small firms that are very active in other countries via foreign direct investment. So they are multinational companies. So the relationship between size and being or not a transnational company is an interesting topic to study because, of course, there are, for the large majority, large companies, but there are also small transnational companies. And it is not clear at all why and what are the factors that make these small companies to be able to be active in the international markets as transnational companies. There is a lot of research going on this, and it is, in my view, an interesting topic to be studied. Second question that we may ask is, where do transnational companies come from? Okay, are all transnational companies from developed economies? So they are all Europe-based companies investing abroad, or US-based company investing in other countries? Well, the answer is yes, but the trend is changing. The trend is changing over time. Again, this data shows you the share of transnational company looking at where the home country of the company is located, okay, in 1990 and in 2010. So in 1990, more than 90% of the companies, of transnational company, had their own country based in developed economies, and only 10% was based, or for only 10% of the firm, the home country was in developing country. In 2010, of course, the majority is still from developed economies, but the share of transnational company whose home country is based on developing economies has increased significantly, okay? Moving from something like 10% to something like 30%, okay? So it has increased 3 times, which suggests that the characteristics, or the, let's say, the nature of transnational companies in terms of characteristics, in terms of where they come from, basically, is changing over time, and it is becoming more and more relevant, the presence of transnational companies active worldwide, but where these companies come from developing economies, not anymore just from developed ones. And again, as we will see, China played an important role in this, okay, because it is nowadays still classified by international standard as a developing economy, but it has lots of companies that have now become transnational companies by all sort of means of definitions, okay. Another interesting aspect is not only where they come from, okay, but also where do multinational companies go? So where do they invest? Do they invest only in developed economy, or do they invest also in developing economies? The answer is very interesting in my view, and it comes out from this graph. This graph is based on, again, it's a bit old, 2011, but the pattern is still valid nowadays. The striking figures that comes out from the striking evidence that comes out from this figure, from this graph, is what? Well, that nearly 50% of affiliates of transnational companies in 2011 were in China. Okay, so half of the foreign direct investments, so half of the investments that were made by companies, either coming from developing economies or from developed economies, were going to China. So they were investments that were associated with the acquisitions of control of Chinese companies, or the creation of new branches of companies in China. Okay, this is a striking evidence, okay, which suggests that China is attracting a lot of investments nowadays in terms of foreign direct investments. I mean, in terms of investments that are related to the creation of multinational companies. The remaining foreign direct investments, where do they go? Well, the large majority goes to the developed economies, 43%, and then only 8% of these investments go to developing economies. Okay, so only 8% of transnational of investments that are related to the creation of transnational company go to developing countries that are different from China. Okay, this is also, I think, in my view, an interesting evidence. Okay, last picture that I want to show you, it concerns, I know there is not a picture, but it's just the last let's say evidence that I want to discuss with you. It concerns the sector of activity. Okay, so the question is, are transnational companies only in manufacturing, or they are in all sectors? Why only manufacturing? Well, because back in time, when we were observing the first transnational companies, in particular at the beginning of the 20th century, most of the transnational companies were actually in the manufacturing sector. Okay, so in particular, there were investments abroad that were targeted to the supply of raw materials. So the main reason why a company at the beginning of the 20th century could decide to become a transnational company was because this company wanted to acquire control to on this acquire control on the supply of raw materials. For instance, a company that was producing something in Europe that needed the supply of a raw material that was located in, I don't know, US or in Africa or in China. What did they do? They basically acquired control of the foreign company that was supplying this raw material in order to be sure to know the quality of this raw material, to have a good bargaining on the cost of this raw material and things like that. Okay. Now that was the main reason back in time. At that time, that is not anymore the case nowadays, because after World War II, what we have observed is a significant increase of transnational companies operating in services rather than in manufacturing. And this suggests that also the reasons why you become a multinational company have changed significantly. And as we will see by the end of this course, rather than finding cheap and direct raw materials, the main reason nowadays has become more related to acquiring the knowledge that you need to provide your service. And this knowledge sometimes can be, the knowledge that is relevant for you to sell your services sometimes is located in different countries rather than the country where you operate. And that's the reason why you become a multinational company, because you want to get somehow control over the company that is producing this knowledge that you need. Okay, so this explains partly the shift from manufacturing to services, but again, we will have more time to discuss about this specific issue when we will go into the detail of our course.